Hello friends, welcome to Star Explainer. Tales of Herding Gods Part 386 explains based on novel. So let's start explanation. The corpses of the masters of creation from prehistory. Qin Mu raised his head to take a look. Those gigantic corpses were walking on the galaxy, as though they were walking on water. Every time their feet land, it created many strange-looking ripples. This galaxy was the divine art of Wei Sui Feng, and just a slight touch would cause its power to explode. Strangely, these walking corpses of the masters of creation could walk on its surface without touching it. Even more bizarre, this group of walking corpses was traversing the Great Void. The Great Void was vast and empty. However, these giant corpses were traveling through it as though they were ascetic monks, and walking through the void was part of their cultivation training. Also, they were a group of corpses without life force. What's the origin of these walking corpses? Qin Mu asked Yun Chuxiu, who was beside him. Yun Chuxiu shook her head and said, "I don't know. This is what the Emperor of Endless Clouds discovered when he was exploring the Great Void. These corpses love to lumber along in the Great Void, paying no attention to others. The Emperor of Endless Clouds realized that they have no souls and have been dead for more than 10,000 years. The strange but marvelous thing is, one feels a sense of peace when walking beside them, making the Great Void unable to influence the devil in your heart. If you're able to run into them, you'll be safe for the rest of your journey." As these walking corpses walked above the galaxy, the ship followed below them. With these walking corpses around, the devils in their hearts were not stirred, and strange apparitions didn't appear. Suddenly, Qin Mu flew off the ship. He circled the galaxy and arrived on its surface, carefully examining these walking corpses. "Celestial Venerable Mu, what are you doing?" Everybody on the ship got a fright, and their scalps went numb. Yun Chuxiu shouted, "These walking corpses are our guardians. Don't do anything hasty." Lian Huahuan's eyes flickered as she gently said, "Celestial Venerable Mu is so reckless. We would be safer if we got rid of him. What do you think?" Luo Wushuang frowned slightly and looked at the rest. Many on the ship were nodding their heads, agreeing to put Celestial Venerable Mu to death. Celestial Venerable Mu doesn't seem to realize that there are many people on the ship that want to kill him. Luo Wushuang felt that it was all very absurd. Qin Mu was, in name, the expedition leader, leading them to rendezvous with Celestial Venerable Hua and Celestial Venerable Shu. He didn't expect that almost everybody on this ship wanted to get rid of him. Even Luo Wushuang himself had a grudge with Qin Mu over his severed arm. It seems that this trip to the Great Void wasn't for exploration, but to specifically get rid of Qin Mu, this little fellow. Luo Wushuang thought to himself. Qin Mu ignored the cheers of the people on the ship, and continued to observe these walking corpses. They were indeed the masters of creation from prehistory. The hearts of their brows were embedded with grand primordium divine stones. However, as they had been dead for a long time, he couldn't feel their pulses or breath. These masters of creation were coincidentally heading in the same direction Wei Sui Feng's galaxy was pointing. Qin Mu flew to the side of one of the walking corpses. He circled around the giant, trying to determine the cause of death for these masters of creation. Strangely, there were no wounds on these masters of creation. Also, their clothes were fresh and new. Qin Mu muttered to himself as his sword pellet transformed into a flying sword, which cut off a corner of a walking corpse's clothes. Weirdly, the clothes regenerated. The clothes were able to regenerate because these corpses used their grand primordium divine stones and consciousnesses to create them. Although they are dead, their consciousnesses survived and are maintained in the same condition as when they were alive. Even though they are dead, their consciousnesses are still circulating. Even if they are injured, they'll be healed by their consciousnesses. Qin Mu was trying to think of the reason these walking corpses were fixated on heading in a particular direction. However, he had no way of finding out. Xu Zhan's voice came through, saying, "Let me communicate with their consciousnesses and find out what they went through when they were alive. They don't even have souls. Is it possible to communicate?" Qin Mu was shocked. For masters of creation, this is natural. Not to mention communication after death, as long as one's consciousness is strong enough, they can gain the knowledge of generations of dead masters of creation from the void, gathering together their wisdom. Xu Zhan said, "Tiny life forms like you need to learn in order to master the knowledge that your ancestors passed down. For masters of creation, a newborn could gain our entire knowledge through a mere touch on the forehead from a senior. This is how vulgar and primitive you people are." Qin Mu asked puzzledly, "If you don't learn but absorb directly instead, how do you correct anything that may be wrong?" Xu Zhan was stunned. Correct anything that may be wrong? There's nothing wrong in the knowledge of our ancestors. Why do we need to correct them? Qin Mu shook his head. The way to improve paths, skills, and divine arts was to have a questioning mind when learning and to spot the errors of prior generations. When knowledge was being imbued into a child's head, that would become his truth, which they would take for granted without questioning it. In this manner, there was no chance to discover mistakes in the ancestral knowledge that was being passed down. All types of reform started with the foundation. The reform of eternal peace started with the foundations of sword skills, knives, and runes before moving on to change the foundations of realms, divine treasures, and even the foundation of people's everyday necessities. And to break the God in one's heart, that was the foundation of the state of mind. If one's entire knowledge was being imbued directly, how could one seek to change its foundation? The methods of learning of the masters of creation may have been faster, but it was easy to cause stagnation in the paths, skills, and divine arts, resulting in the stifling of knowledge. Qin Mu opened the heart of his brows. He immediately felt Xu Zhan's consciousness surging forth from the grand primordium origin stone, his powerful consciousness touching the consciousnesses of these corpses. Qin Mu followed Xu Zhan's consciousness. A vast world suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, consisting of boundless seas, huge mountains, waterfalls, and white clouds. These gigantic masters of creation walked among the tall mountains and steep hills and traversed the jade-colored Great Sea. Some of these giants thought of wings and flew among the blue skies. Some giants visualized colorful plants of all sorts, lush forests ceaselessly materializing from their imaginations into reality. Some of these powerful masters of creation flew among the starry sky, gathering together to create the sun, moon, and stars. This was the new world they created, away from the conflict. They lived a free and unrestrained life. Their clothing was simple and plain, without any extravagant ornaments. From the consciousnesses of these walking corpses, Qin Mu was able to sense that the world they were originally from was already unlivable. Apart from them fighting and killing each other, powerful ancient gods were also trying to exterminate them. They visualized and created a new world, one that had nothing, requiring them to develop it and make it perfect. Suddenly, a humongous figure descended into the world they visualized. A terrifying wave of consciousness rippled and swept across the void, causing it to crumble. As the world created by these masters of creation, through visualization, wasn't yet stable, the arrival of this figure caused the crumbling world to disintegrate into pure consciousness, which surged backward into the minds of these masters of creation. Qin Mu watched this scene in a daze. What was originally a beautiful world had become a death-filled scene of carnage. These masters of creation raised their heads to look at the sky, their mouths unable to make any sound. The consciousness seemed as though it had taken on a physical form. It burrowed into the hearts of their brows, destroying their brains and shattering their souls, turning them into corpses. This was the last thing these walking corpses saw. The images in front of Qin Mu disappeared, without a trace, as Xu Zhan retracted his consciousness. On the grand primordium origin stone's sacrificial altar, Shujun's empty head was panting heavily. Because he didn't have a tongue, teeth, or corporeal body, it looked weird. Air was sucked through his mouth and exited through the bottom of his head. Qin Mu was also breathing heavily, his forehead covered with cold sweat. Shujun, did you see that majestic figure? Qin Mu composed himself and asked. That person was able to enter the great void. He must be one of the masters of creation. So why did he want to destroy the great void? Shujun shook his head, his consciousness unstable. I didn't manage to see who it was. Qin Mu blinked his eyes. Since he was borrowing Shujun's consciousness, he was unable to see everything completely. It was likely that Shujun had seen who the figure was but was unwilling to divulge it. Shujun, we're both like ants on a rope, in the same boat, facing the same enemy. If you saw anything, please tell me. He was slowly swaying him. Shujun gave a cold humph. In the same boat. You have a broken boat. Everywhere, there are people trying to kill you. You better think of how to deal with the difficult encounter that's in front of you at the moment. Qin Mu gave a faint smile. Clearly, he knew that most of the people on the ship below wanted to kill him. Meeting up with Celestial Venerable Hua and Celestial Venerable Shu was just an excuse created by the Celestial Venerables of the Celestial Heavens. In reality, they wanted to send him out to the Great Void and find a chance to get rid of him. Needless to say, even if they were unable to kill him, he would be banished to the Great Void forever. Anyway, there were no important figures on the ship. Celestial Venerable Mu, return to the ship quickly. Lian Huahan said gently, these walking corpses are extremely peculiar. A Celestial Venerable shouldn't place himself in danger. Celestial Venerable, it's safer to return to the ship. Qin Mu stood on the shoulder of one of the walking corpses. His clothes fluttered in the air as he said, Sister Lian, I'm admiring the view here. Please don't disturb me. On the ship, Xiu Yufang, who was under Celestial Venerable Hao, smiled tenderly and said, Celestial Venerable, what's good to see over there? We have a better view here. Qin Mu ignored them. A thread of vital qi burst forth, flying towards the galaxy that was below the walking corpses. The people on the ship stared at him with burning hatred as they shouted, Crook Mu, stop it. Qin Mu brat, you dare. Celestial Venerable Mu, please don't. This galaxy was a strange phenomenon formed by the divine art of Emperor of Endless Clouds, Wei Suifeng. If triggered by Qin Mu, everyone on the ship, including strong practitioners such as Luo Wushuang, would be destroyed by the power of this divine art. Qin Mu tried to rouse the vital qi he sent into the galaxy. What puzzled him was that Wei Suifeng's divine art didn't explode. He scratched his head and channeled more vital qi, but Wei Suifeng's divine art remained like a calm river flowing through the void. Shujun was delighted at his misfortune. Little brat, you have miscalculated. Although these masters of creation are dead, their consciousnesses remain. It may just be consciousness, but it's able to subdue this divine art. Qin Mu retracted his vital qi, and said resentfully, why didn't you mention this earlier? Shujun gave a cold humph and said proudly, had you restored my corporeal body earlier, I could have easily crushed these tiny worms. However, I can still protect your life. As long as you supply me with 3 years of consciousness, qi, and blood. Upon seeing that Wei Suifeng's divine art wasn't triggered by Qin Mu, the fear of the gods and devils on the ship turned into pluck. Pan Chunjing rose and flew towards the top of the galaxy, shouting, everyone, there's no need to wait any longer. Now that we're here, he can't escape back to the celestial heavens. Let's kill him and complete our mission. That's right. Everyone on the ship flew up, one after another. They shouted, the deeper we venture into the great void, the lower our chances of returning safely to the celestial heavens. Let's take the opportunity to kill old Crook Mu so that we can still go back." Qin Mu laughed heartily as he launched himself into the air off the walking corpse. He landed on the shoulder of another corpse before flying off again. Behind him, the crowd charged with their attacks, each releasing their auras. Qin Mu turned his head to take a look and saw that there were no divine arts practitioners among them. Most of them were gods. Celestial palaces materialized behind them, some even managing to materialize multiple celestial palaces. There were about 20 people on the ship who didn't fly up. Instead, they stared at each other, speechless. Yun Chuxiu took a few glances at Luo Wushuang and asked curiously, "There's a deep feud between Divine Knife Luo and Overlord Body Qin. Why did you not attack?" Luo Wushuang plainly said, "If I decide to make a move, I won't do it through the actions of others. I want a fair fight, defeating him by my own knife." "Why did you not attack?" Yun Chuxiu's gaze landed on Lian Huahun, who was beside her, and then she chuckled. "I don't want to kill him, why should I attack? Am I right, younger sister Lian?" Lian Huahun was expressionless and coldly said, "Wretch, you should refer to me as elder sister." If Qin Mu was on the ship, he would definitely have been so alarmed to hear this line that he would jump up in fright. He had guessed that Yun Chuxiu was Celestial Empress all along, and there were also various signs to indicate his guess was right, and that Celestial Empress was the instigator, who had schemed to kill her own sister, Mistress Yuanmu, and then possessed her corporeal body before returning to the celestial heavens. Celestial Empress had then transformed into Ju Wuchen to seduce Celestial Emperor into reincarnating before she assassinated him. After Celestial Venerable Ling killed her, she took the opportunity to reincarnate as well, infiltrating the Heaven Alliance and becoming one of the Celestial Venerables. He also guessed that Lian Huahun was the reincarnation of Mistress Yuanmu, even going as far as suspecting that Mistress Yuanmu didn't die completely, and had also infiltrated the Heaven Alliance, becoming one of the 10 Celestial Venerables as well. The reason he made such conjectures, and was deeply convinced by it, was that Yun Chuxiu knew of the fact that he had previously tried to summon the soul of Celestial Empress on the ghost ship. However, Lian Huahun saying, "Refer to me as elder sister," had completely flipped his conjecture upside down. It was a pity that Qin Mu wasn't on the ship. What was even more of a pity was that Luo Wushuang wasn't aware of the origins of these two ladies, and he was also utterly uninterested in their sibling feud and thus merely looked up above the galaxy. On the galaxy, Qin Mu and the others were moving as fast as flowing light, as the gods pursued him from behind to kill him. If Overlord Body Qin leaves the area protected by the walking corpses, it will trigger the devil within his heart. Why is he being so reckless, and so intent on angering these strong practitioners on the ship? Luo Wushuang followed the direction of the galaxy and looked ahead. Suddenly, he felt a jolt in his heart. He saw that in the darkness of the void, there was a boundless land at the edge of the galaxy. The land of the Great Void. So that's it, he saw the land of the Great Void. 2 rays of knife lights shot out of Luo Wushuang's eyes and crisscrossed through the air with clanging noises that alarmed the people on the ship. He yelled out, "Immediately redirect the ship, and head towards the land of the Great Void." The remaining 20 to 30 people on the ship hurriedly steered the ship and increased its speed. Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahun also looked away from each other to help move the ship. The land of the Great Void was a piece of floating land within the Great Void that the Emperor of Endless Clouds, Wei Suifeng, had discovered. There were no strange and unpredictable heart devils. This time around, Celestial Venerable Hua and Celestial Venerable Shu had led their many disciples to travel about the Great Void with the intention of uncovering the secret of the land of the Great Void and to search for the traces of Carefree Village and Founding Emperor. The ship immediately picked up speed and chased after Qin Mu and the others. Luo Wushuang even personally activated his vital qi to increase the speed of the ship to its maximum. Very soon, the ship had caught up with the group that was pursuing Qin Mu. Luo Wushuang yelled out, "We have reached the land of the Great Void, return to the ship." Countless rays of light spun about and fell from the top of the galaxy, landing one by one on the ship. Everyone was filled with a murderous aura as they looked towards Qin Mu, who was ahead running atop the celestial river. They each prepared their divine arts and activated their divine weapons, waiting for the moment when they caught up with Qin Mu to kill him from across the celestial river. At this very moment, Luo Wushuang suddenly felt cold sweat forming on his forehead, as he said in a hoarse voice, "There are no more walking corpses ahead. Stop the ship. Stop the ship quickly." At the same time, Qin Mu had leaped up from the shoulder of the last walking corpse. During the split second that he leaped into the air, countless teleportation runes surrounding his body lit up and revolved around him noisily as they enveloped him and vanished with him. Celestial Venerable Mu is really slippery. Yun Chuxiu clasped her palms together and praised. The ship was gradually slowing down, yet due to its momentum, it still flew past the body of the last walking corpse, continuing to dash forwards for another 100 miles. Everyone on the ship couldn't help but grow fearful, and their various heart devils emerged one by one. Luo Wushuang shook his head and cried out, "Don't stop, activate the ship with all your might, and rush into the land of the Great Void before your heart devils materialize." Just as he finished his sentence, he heard a tapping noise. Luo Wushuang felt cold sweat on his forehead, and he turned around to look. Behind the ship, a Qin Mu standing atop a chest appeared and looked towards him with an awe-inspiring gaze. The chest started to run at top speed, pursuing the ship. At the same time, the space outside the ship started to shake, and a massive eyeball squeezed its way out of the void with a cruel and vicious gaze. It wasn't known whose heart devil this eyeball was. The massive eyeball suddenly split into top and bottom, and the eyeball was actually filled with razor-sharp teeth. It opened its big mouth and came biting towards the ship. At that instant, all sorts of monsters started to emerge from the void. There were vicious dragons longer than the ship, monsters with tentacles that hid beneath the ship, massive spiders with numerous eyes on their backs, a headless bride, and even ancient gods that were engulfed in fiery flames. In addition, there weren't only monsters, even the figure of the ancient celestial emperor had emerged from the void. There were also celestial venerables. It wasn't known which of these disciples had their own masters as the devils within their hearts. "We've fallen into his trap." Luo Wushuang let out a sigh in his heart. He pulled out his knife and cleaved it down towards that massive eyeball as he thought to himself, the reason Overlord Body Qin started to run off before he reached the land of the Great Void was to make us chase after him. Then, he would make use of the teleportation divine art to teleport to the land of the Great Void a step ahead of us. As for us, when we left the area protected by the aura of the walking corpses in pursuit of him, we would be killed by the devils within our hearts. This brat, he's truly ruthless. A god official on the ship cried out shrilly, "There's no need to utilize neither thought nor no thought anymore. Concentrate all magic power and dash towards the land of the Great Void." He had only just finished his sentence when a flying dragon with wings pounced down and grabbed him, dragging him into the void. A scream could be heard from the void. Countless monsters surged out of the void and pounced onto that god official, and very soon, he was dead. Luo Wushuang killed the massive eyeball monster, and immediately continued to activate the ship with all his might. Everyone on the ship gave their all to increase the speed of the ship to its maximum. There were flickering shadows about the ship. Even though this ship was a top-notch divine weapon, it had already started to break apart noisily from the stress of traveling at such a high speed. Deck boards were bursting apart one by one, and rivets were loosening and flying off the ship at great speeds. The hull of the ship was shaking from side to side, and it threatened to fall apart at any moment. Luo Wushuang snuck a glance, and saw that the imposing celestial emperor, in the void, was turning his head around slowly to look towards the ship. He felt a chill in his heart. The body of this celestial emperor was really too massive. Although the speed of the ship was extremely fast, in front of this colossal thing, it seemed so insignificant. The ship was like a teeny tiny bug that was flying by the ancient celestial emperor slowly, brushing past his nostrils. Fortunately, even with the great void forming the heart devil celestial emperor, it would take some time before he materialized completely. This would give them the chance to escape to the land of the great void. However, although the ancient celestial emperor was forming fairly slowly, the formation of the other heart devils was shockingly fast. The devils within the hearts of the people on board the ship grew steadily, and there were endless monsters that emerged by the speeding ship, which pounced towards it. Thump! A monster with 6 limbs and 2 wings, which resembled a fusion of a wolf and a tiger, leaped onto the deck. Opening its wide mouth, it swallowed a god whole. Luo Wushuang pounced forward with knife rays shining and killed the monster. However, beneath the ship, there were countless tentacles flying about that were clinging onto the ship and slowing its speed. Luo Wushuang shook his knife, and the blade ray split into 2, then into 4, and finally into 8. In a short period, his blade rays flowed downwards from mid-air, resembling a waterfall, and they moved along the deck and the side of the ship. The blade rays avoided the people on the ship, and in the blink of an eye, they cleansed the entire ship, tearing the monsters at the bottom of the ship into 1,000 pieces. Luo Wushuang was, after all, a great expert of the numinous sky realm, who had entered the path with his knife and had exceptional abilities. Even though there were many monsters that had leaped onto the ship, he was still able to guarantee the safety of everyone on board. At this very moment, a giant wheel of light appeared ahead. The incomparably intense bright light was incredibly eye-catching, and following it, a head slowly rose up. Celestial Venerable Hong. Luo Wushuang sucked in a cold breath. The Celestial Venerable that was gradually rising upwards was Celestial Venerable Hong, one of the 10 Celestial Venerables of the celestial heavens. Although Celestial Venerable Hong was still an apparition, the wheel of light at the back of his head had already been formed completely. He raised his palm and grabbed in the direction of the ship. "Are you raising your knife to a Celestial Venerable?" Luo Wushuang's face turned ashen. He didn't know whose heart devil this Celestial Venerable Hong was, but he was also the devil in his heart. He dared not raise his knife to a Celestial Venerable. It's a Celestial Venerable. A sovereign of the celestial heavens. Even if it was just an apparition, even if it was merely a devil within one's heart that was created by the Great Void, he still dared not attack a Celestial Venerable. The Celestial Venerable represented the supreme heavenly might, represented the most formidable battle powers of the celestial heavens. Just thinking of raising his knife against a Celestial Venerable was a great sin alone, much less actually doing it. However, Luo Wushuang raised his knife with his only arm, leaping up into the sky with a decisive look in his eyes as he roared fiercely, "I dare to beat up even Celestial Venerable Mu. Much less Celestial Venerable Hong. Let me destroy the god within my heart." Behind him, his celestial palaces flew out with a buzz, and his primordial spirit stood in the numinous sky hall of the celestial palace. He pulled out his knife at the same time, and sliced down at the apparition of Celestial Venerable Hong. As he sliced down with the knife, Luo Wushuang could only feel a sense of heroism gushing out from within his chest. All along, his knife skills had been skillfully calculated and prim and proper, achieving the samadhi state of precision. However, despite being exquisite, they had lacked a sense of heroism. Yet, at this moment, he was actually stepping outside of the boundaries of precision. The knife flash hit Celestial Venerable Hong's large hand and sliced apart the palm of this apparition. Then, the extremely brilliant ray of knife light landed on Celestial Venerable Hong's face, slicing deeply into his skull. Piak! A crisp sound rang out, and the knife in Luo Wuxuang's hand exploded. Even though he was merely an apparition, the power of this celestial venerable Hong was still incredibly great and beyond comprehension. He had disintegrated the divine knife that had accompanied Luo Wuxuang throughout his life. Luo Wuxuang was struck by the blow to the point that he spat out blood and stumbled backward. Behind him, the ship was rushing in his direction, and his body crashed onto the ship and slid a few hundred yards. The ship passed through the halo at the back of the head of this celestial venerable Hong apparition and flew away. Up ahead was the land of the Great Void. The apparition of celestial venerable Hong slowly turned around, and behind him, the palm of the apparition of the ancient celestial emperor was heading towards the ship. The ship rushed into the land of the Great Void with a whoosh, and at this same instant, the palm of the ancient celestial emperor had also reached the land of the Great Void. Everyone's hearts were filled with fear and shock as they looked at the approaching palm of celestial emperor in a daze and with helplessness. They watched as this enormous palm reached the atmosphere of the land of the Great Void, and immediately, the palm started to burn and was reduced to black ashes that scattered about in an instant. Evidently, this piece of land in the Great Void was protected by some strange power that stopped it from getting invaded by the monsters outside. However, the power of this palm still caused a terrifying aftermath. Even though it hadn't reached the ship still shattered into pieces, and the divine would burst apart. The people on the ship seemed to have suffered a huge blow and were all spitting out blood. Those with weaker abilities were crushed into bits directly, their corporeal bodies exploding in midair. Even their primordial spirits turned into dust. It wasn't clear whose heart devil the ancient celestial emperor was. Despite the fact that he had yet to materialize completely, or that the palm had been destroyed on its own when it reached the land of the Great Void, the aftereffects still almost completely wiped them out. Luo Wuxuang went all out to defend against this blow, taking the brunt of the attack. Because of this, countless wounds burst open all over his body, and fresh blood spewed out as he fell from midair. He wasn't able to protect the disciples of the various celestial venerables, and big shots of the celestial heavens on the ship. At least half of the gods perished under the aftereffects of the blow. Luo Wuxuang felt his heart turn cold, and an insuppressible sorrow surged into his heart. Although their mission was led by Qin Mu, the one who was responsible for the safety of the disciples of the celestial venerables and big shots was him. Now that so many had died, he wouldn't be able to be absolved from blame. Even if he was able to leave the Great Void alive, when he returned to the celestial heavens, he would still be unable to escape the punishment of death. He was completely disheartened and simply allowed his body to drop freely from the sky. As he fell, he saw the grand and magnificent mountains beneath him, which were a lot bigger than the regular mountains, and were even more elegant and tall. The river below was also wider, and the waterfall looked as though it fell from the skies, as it flowed downwards for over 100 miles. White clouds drifted leisurely, and they were as dense as the sea. His figure fell through the skies, and as he streaked past a tall mountain, he saw the flying waterfall that descended from the skies like the Milky Way. He saw Qin Mu standing at the highest point of the flying waterfall, raising his head to watch as the more than 100 figures engulfed in flames and thick smoke came crashing down from the destroyed ship, scattering all across the land of the Great Void. Qin Mu retracted his gaze. Seemingly noticing Luo Wuxuang, he gave him a small smile. This devilish brat. Luo Wuxuang was enraged as he crashed into the deep pool at the bottom of the waterfall with a loud noise. At the highest point of the waterfall, Qin Mu unrolled a scroll containing a topographic map, and inspected it carefully before he looked around his surroundings and compared the area against the map. After some time, the waterfall suddenly started to flow in reverse and rushed up into the sky. It resembled an extremely large knife made of water, slicing open the sky. Luo Wuxuang stood atop the waterfall that was flowing in reverse and walked towards Qin Mu with murderous intent. He enunciated each word carefully, saying, Celestial Venerable Mu, you are a hidden danger to the entire celestial heavens. You are extremely scheming and ruthless. Qin Mu rolled up the topographic map and smiled. I have saved your life before. I'm not trying to kill you on behalf of the celestial heavens. I merely want to continue that battle from 40,000 years ago, to kill the devil in my heart. Luo Wushuang was like an unsheathed divine knife, and there was a great sense of heroism surging within his heart, as he announced solemnly, Luo Wushuang of the Spirit Elite Guards hereby challenges the overlord body of the High Emperor. Please. Part 386 end here. Thank you for watching.